But if I get elected president, I will bring it back.
Not have sexual relations.
I realize that this is something he is
We're not going to be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Hey, this is Steve Hickson with Backfire and John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey.
Where's the beef?
Good morning. Daniel Brantley, our chief engineer. Good morning, everybody. We've all had our coffee and we're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to go. There's a fire downtown Cleveland this morning. Mm-hmm. The old Griffith Kawasaki building was on fire for the third time.
For the third time in 3 years.
Concrete block for the most part and metal.
Well,
apparently there was a little bit else.
Somehow the homeless keep burning it somehow. Hell, Franklin was telling me an interesting story. The first time it burnt. Go ahead and tell him that story, Franklin.
A entrepreneur, if you will, with some skills, who was apparently homeless, however, had managed to bypass a box and run wiring into the building so that hot plates could be used, and some rudimentary plumbing going, and he was renting out spots inside the building for about $5 a night, something like that, with heat and water.
How long back was this?
Oh, that's about 3-4 years ago when that happened.
Well, you got to give him a little credit for seeing.
He was an entrepreneur.
He saw a market and he, went for it.
Well, it's on fire again. This one probably will do it. Looked like the whole Cleveland Fire Department was down there this morning when I came in.
I do have a hard time knowing how much you could burn in there. It is block with a metal roof and metal structure.
Well, the last time it burned, it sustained some significant structural damage, and I suspect it may have finished the job off this time.
Well, is that any more marketable as a lot as it is as a building? And that's purely opinion. None of us are real. Well, Steve, you're a real estate person.
What's that?
Is that any more marketable as a lot as it is as a building?
Well, I don't think so.
In that location?
The demolition costs are pretty extensive, probably.
Yeah. If you built something back there, what would you build there? Except warehouses or something like that. I don't know. Hard to tell. Pieces of property like that, property like that needs to be taken as a block. Oh, lordy, lordy, lordy.
How about that air conditioning break yesterday for the city schools?
What happened? I didn't hear all that.
Cleveland High School was dismissed at 11:30 yesterday because the air conditioning malfunctioned.
Well, that would be the geothermal heating and cooling system that we spent millions of dollars putting in, that nobody with their own money puts in this part of the country.
You know how on a Major League Baseball team, they have somebody whose job is to throw batting practice?
Right.
I knew that was what's going to happen, and I just served that up for John because I wanted to get him a good swing.
It's the God's honest truth. That my daughter went to Cleveland High. We hit them all. Lisa and I are Bradley graduates. Ian is a Walker Valley graduate, and Alex is a Cleveland graduate. But that system was doing that when Alex was there. One room would be burning hot, and the other room would be freezing cold. They've had to work on it multiple times. They've had to work on the system over at Cleveland Middle School. That was a waste of money, and I say this all the time. What bothers me about politics and local politics is nobody is ever held accountable for these kind of mistakes. And people go, well, why is it so important for someone to be held accountable? Because then you recognize the mistake and you don't keep doing it. Even after all this problem Cleveland High has had with that system, going back years, we have continued to install those geothermal heating and cooling systems in other schools.
When you say geothermal, explain what you're talking about.
They drill wells, a whole bunch of wells, down into the ground. And look, this is extremely surface level because I don't fully understand it, but the wells, the water circulates down the well, back up, in the ground.
The ground helps
58 degrees average temperature, and it helps run the heating and cooling system. The problem is you have to have a certain gradient in your heat for it to work. I had an engineer in the office that's all he did all over the country, and he said that they only work in certain parts of the country. They don't work here. And he said there's a reason you don't see companies putting them in with their own money, because they don't work. Now, the city will say, we had a study that showed that it worked, and it paid for itself in about 8 years. Well, the engineer told me when he advises a company, he says that if it doesn't pay for itself in 3 years, you've lost money. But what the city did is TVA finances it, and they don't count the cost of the capital into that equation. Now, we, the rest of the citizens, pay that cost of the capital. So it's a bad system. We shouldn't have done it. We shouldn't be doing it anymore, and this is what you get with it. They've done it. They did it at Arnold, and the wells collapsed, and they've had to go back in. Yes, they did it at Arnold, and of course this is another thing we do. Nobody's held accountable. Now, I don't know who put the wells in, but apparently they weren't packed right with gravel around, and they collapsed. And every time things like that happens, the school system just goes, well, okay, taxpayer will eat that. Cleveland Middle School, to be honest, and I'm pretty sure this was a community tectonics, which frankly ripped us city and county off for years with no bid contracts and horrible construction. They built Blythe Bower down there, and within a year the windows were rusting around them, the floor tiles were popping up. They did this at Cleveland Middle, the geothermal, they put it in. Well, they didn't actually follow the plan. So I'm arguing that it's a bad system to begin with, but it's a really bad system when you don't even put it in correctly. So they didn't drill the wells deep enough, and they didn't put as many wells in there. Now, like I said, I don't fully understand the system, but I got enough sense to know that if you're depending on the water temperature, the number of wells and the depth of the well is probably a significant thing. And from what I was told, we had a city council member that basically had to tell the city school board, if you people don't hold this company accountable, because that happened within the first year, and the warranty was about to expire, that if you don't hold this company accountable, you will pierce the veil of protection that you as a school board member have, and you can be held personally liable for that. And that's the only reason they went back on the builder and made them come back in and try to fix it.
Well, if they hadn't run that air conditioning system so hard in the month of August, maybe they wouldn't have had a problem.
Well, that's a tee up for another issue for me. If we would quit going to school in August, North Georgia, several of the districts in North Georgia they added 20 minutes to each day, and that allowed them to cut the entire month of August off of the schedule. So not only would your kids get a summer we grew up with, which was June, July, and August,
right,
but you actually would save money because it cost a fortune to cool a building down in August. It's the hottest, most expensive month to cool, and you have to start in July to get the schools cooled down.
I understand. I'm with you. I think the economy. Just
20 minutes on the day.
Just think of the economy, how much this has hurt the economy, them going back to school earlier and earlier and earlier. Because, there's a big tourism industry out there that's affected by it. I know we're reading in our local newspaper our tourism business is so good, but it could be a whole lot better, I think.
Well, traditionally, August 15th was when you got the cheaper rates in Florida for vacation. That was the last 2 weeks of the summer season. Well, hell, school starts at the first week of August now.
Oh, yeah.
You can't save money on a vacation anymore because school starts too early.
Yeah, that's true.
We didn't go till Labor Day.
All right, let's change the subject. Franklin, who's the top leaders in the Democratic races right now? They're starting to narrow this field. They're getting down to, the top 3 now? They've had 2 debates.
No, they're down to the top 10 or 12.
Well, they have 3 that poll way ahead of everybody else. There's a couple more that are polling so that it's obvious why they would still be in the race.
Kamala
And then
Harris
and-
probably will bump back up.
And then
into
there's a
three.
group that's just a matter of time till they're out. So you got Biden, Harris, Warren, Sanders, Buttigieg. Those are the ones that I think are still viable at this point. And then the rest of them are just kind of holding on, and
But you can't.
they'll be out by October, November.
Beta's selling T-shirts, so depends on what his T-shirt sales goes like.
What's he saying on them?
This is effed up, spelled out over and over and over again down in the. He's making money for his campaign off of the shooting in Texas. He went on air and on normal live TV, he said this is effed up, and he said the word. They had to bleep it out, and then his website started selling a T-shirt that said this is effed up because Beto's cool.
He's cool. I don't know why some people think they're qualified to be a president.
Well, I guess anybody can be, but
I mean,
understand.
I'm sure they can run for it, but I mean, from a business perspective and educational perspective, how can you put that in? If you've never, what's Beto ever done for a living?
He had a startup business that was apparently successful. He was able to sell it later on before he became a member of Congress.
The one you ought to be looking at is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders didn't have a job until after 40. He has never had a job that wasn't the government, and he is now a multimillionaire. Now, you think about it, with 3 homes.
3 homes, yeah.
Think about that. Never held a job till after the age of 40. Only held government jobs, and he's a multimillionaire.
Where did Biden get his money?
I don't actually know.
Well, to the extent that he has much money.
He's not.
Let me finish. I'm sorry.
I wasn't going to argue with you.
To the extent that he has much money, in truth, I think he's largely made it since he left the vice presidency.
He's not real wealthy.
At the time that he left being vice president, his assets, I think, were reported in the $1 to $1.5 million
He was one of
range.
the I don't mean poor. This is not poor, but he was one of the poorer senators his whole career.
Well,
in multiple
that's
ways.
funny that he's one of the poorest ones because they say he's got the largest mansion where he lives now in that New York town or wherever it is.
I mean, you never know.
And then he just recently bought another one in Washington D.C.
Well, you never know. He could have had a shady, organized crime figure like Obama did buy the lot and kind of sell it to him at a discount.
All right. Let's talk about some mass shootings in Texas right now, and Walmart, and 16 shot at the end of a high school football game. John, there's a lot of pressure coming on to get something done. What do you think should happen?
Well, I hope we can have an actual conversation about something that could make a difference.
Well, that's what we're here for.
It's our culture. The problem is if we devolve into an argument over guns, we're wasting our time because it's the culture that we need to talk about. And if we could get that conversation going, we might actually have an effect in multiple other areas as well. We have wasted trillions of dollars on schools in the last 30 to 50 years. We've built bricks and mortar. We've given kids self-esteem. We've gotten rid of the valedictorians. And that's part of the culture that has created these little entitled, spoiled brats that when they get any kind of negative response out of life, they react like this. The culture's what we've got to talk about, not the guns.
There's one kid that shot his whole family.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing to me what's going on in this world, the sickness that's there. And I know that everybody's pushing gun reform. And, John, you're right. There's a culture problem, but, Walmart's, all of a sudden, they're going to quit selling certain types of ammunition and things like this.
That wasn't even a coherent. Nobody really knows what the CEO of Walmart said because it didn't really make, in gun logic, it didn't make sense. So we don't know what he's going to sell or not sell. I assume he will quit selling 223, 5.56, which is the.
He was going to stay with hunting only.
Well,
they were going to get rid of short barrel.
Yeah. Well, first off, he said apparently he did say no pistol ammo.
And they asked they've asked for people not to bring the
to
guns into
conceal,
Walmart.
and that's their right, and that's fine, and people should respect that. But for example, he'll probably get rid of 223 or 5.56 ammo.
Those two.
Here's the
Both
problem with
listed
that.
both of them are listed in
That
the
is probably the best varmint caliber out there, and they make bolt actions in 223. They make single shot rifles in 223. If you're hunting coyotes, one of the best rounds out there, outside of some of the higher speed, more exotics. But 223 is a really good caliber for small game, small big game.
Well, they said they were going to stick with hunting. So,
Well, the problem is it is a hunting round. It's just it's a bullet.
well, they said they were going to get rid of short barrel guns.
Well,
They're
here's
going to stop selling handguns.
Right.
That's
And ammunition to fit
and,
those.
and ammunition that's frequently used in
Well, they're gonna,
AR-15.
yeah, but they said they're going to quit selling all pistol ammo.
Right.
Which let me say
Which, by the way, interesting. They currently sell about 20% of the ammunition in the country, and it said it will take it down to about 6%.
Well, here's the thing I will say about that. I'm against these gun control measures. I don't think they'll have any effect. They haven't had any effect in the past. But having said that, at least Walmart looked at this because the majority of shootings in the country are pistols, not rifles. You know, so this whole push about assault rifles is kind of misplaced, even if you agree with gun control. So at least they looked at that and said, okay, we're going to get rid of the pistol ammo. I don't think this will have any effect. Here's one thing that gets missed in all of this. The Democrats push these things. They're going to tax, they want to tax ammo. So there was one idea when they couldn't get past the Second Amendment. The idea was, well, we'll just tax these things at 50 and 100%. And so we'll tax them out of regular use. But you know what that does? What that does is someone like me, I'll still have ammo. You know, I can pay that tax. It'll be worse, and I won't buy as much maybe, but I'll still buy that. But the people who live in the worst neighborhoods, the people of color that need to be able to protect themselves, those laws will hinder them from having a gun to be able to protect themselves. And the interesting thing about this is the actual history of gun control in America is Jim Crow laws and post-Civil War laws that were solely intended to keep guns out of the hands of black Americans. And it's the Democrat Party that has that history on their hands.
Well, the Chicago mayor said decades of lone crime problem in Chicago is actually the fault of Republican-run states like Indiana because they don't have common sense gun legislation in place.
She called them coward Republicans.
So what do you think about that?
Well, it is an issue. I mean, John likes to point out, well, they have strong gun laws in Chicago. That's true. But if you can go 15 miles away and there are no strong gun laws, and it's easy to acquire these weapons.
What's the
Which
difference in a strong gun law? What
They
is
have virtually no private ownership in Chicago.
Okay.
They have virtually no private ownership in New York City. They have virtually none in California.
When you say no private ownership, there's people there that have them.
It is almost impossible to go through the bureaucratic steps you have to go through to get a license to have one. And the only people that get it are the political elites. And that's my point earlier. These gun control measures are actually, and the Democrats have a history of doing this, they're aimed at the poorest people in our country, the least able to defend themselves, the people who live in the worst neighborhoods. And that's who these laws affect the most.
Well, Chicago's got a problem, and I don't think Illinois, Indiana.
Well, do you know what? Well,
Speed
first
that
off,
problem.
what that tells you is the mayor said that 60% of the guns are bought out of state.
Mm-hmm.
But what that tells you is all of those are illegal purchases on the black market. So what law do you think is going to
No,
change a
they're not
black
all-
market? Yes, they are. It's illegal to do that, Franklin.
People do it all the time.
And by the way, the Chicago police superintendent said that Chicago's violent crime is based on, this is a quote from him, 1,400 repeat offenders driving this gun violence. So what they have is they have mayors or judges that turn these people loose and they commit other crimes. I can give you 2 or 3 examples right here.
Or like they have a problem in Chattanooga, is they have a difficult time getting people to testify.
Well, that may be
against him,
too.
which is the more likely.
Well, one of the
explanation.
reasons is because these people are out, Franklin. If they arrested, University of Chicago Crime Lab looked at 2016's increase in bloodshed and found that 80% of homicide victims had a prior arrest and almost 30% had a prior gun arrest, which means if a judge had put those people in jail and left them in jail, you probably could have reduced a lot of this crime.
What was that? This girl in California that was shot down by the illegal immigrant, Kate
Steinle, they reversed he wasn't convicted of murder or even reckless manslaughter.
And there was a real question about whether he was the one who actually did it or not.
There's no question. There was no question.
I'm sorry, those poor
witnesses
stupid
saw him.
jurors who heard all the evidence in person.
Well, first off, Franklin,
what could they be?
The judge, the judges who reversed this didn't reverse it on anything like that. They reversed it on an instruction that the judge gave. They didn't think he gave the right
found not
instruction.
guilty of the murder, hadn't he?
Well, Franklin, the point is, had
That
it not
isn't
been in
what
the
got
country,
reversed, is
she'd
it?
be alive. No, that's not what got it reversed.
That's not clear at all.
Why
it's
is
not clear he did it?
Why was he even here? He'd been sent back
because
7
the
times.
Democrats in Congress refused to address immigration and have, in fact, now gone over to Open Borders Party. They are an Open Borders Party.
He was sent back 7 times.
Right.
I mean, that's what's wrong with America.
Mm-hmm.
Is it not right? Do you think?
Here's what I can tell you.
Do you
Steve.
think we have a problem because of illegals?
You've got 7 illegal aliens in one county in Maryland have now been arrested in 1 month for rape. Up to and you know why this is all coming out all of a sudden?
It's not all of them. It's just a few bad ones that keep coming in, and we're not filtering them
Well, how
out,
many
Franklin.
murders are acceptable? How many rapes are acceptable?
None.
So I'm not saying, I agree, it's not all of them. It's not anywhere near a large number of them.
Apparently, there's no limit on how many is acceptable as long as it was somebody who purchased a handgun.
Franklin?
Or an assault rifle. It's okay then.
All right, here's the point, Franklin. We had an assault weapons ban for 10 years.
Yes.
The Justice Department did a study and said it had absolutely no effect.
That's not true.
But we know that had Kate Steinle's murderer been kept out of the country, he wouldn't have been there to kill her.
Actually, what it showed was that there was a decline in violent crimes committed
Across
with
the
assault rifles. What also happened at that point was you had an explosion of people purchasing expanded magazines and using them on other types
Franklin,
of weapons,
I'm gonna
which is
say
really
this
part
right.
of the other
The
common
Justice
sense reform
Department
that needs to be
report
made.
actually had the language that said no effect. That was the study result. No effect. And by the way,
You're
Franklin,
just cherry-picking information now.
all right, I'll give. You know why this isn't going anywhere? Alyssa
Yes,
Milano.
because you're not willing to
No,
even
that's
listen
not
to
true.
any argument at all.
No, Franklin, I want facts. I don't want emotion. I want fact.
Facts, John. The facts are incredible numbers of these mass shootings are taking place with certain kinds of weapons. There's a reason for that.
Franklin?
It's because they're highly efficient killing machines.
Attacker in
That's the
China
reason.
killed 8
It's-
this week with a knife. We had a knife attack in between the Texas shooting and the Dayton shooting,
Yes,
where it was a multiple murder with a knife.
Yes, John.
And by the way, Beto O'Rourke, when he said that's effed up, and he actually said, I'm going to take everyone's guns away from them. He didn't say we're going to grandfather. He actually said they're going to forcibly take our guns away from us. He said it, ironically, in Charlottesville, where a guy used a car to kill multiple people.
What country is it they're taking away the weapons right now?
Well, New Zealand took
Yeah.
them all away, and
Well-
yet you had a mass killing with a gun.
There's some country, I've lost the article, but there's some countries going through it right now.
France
They're
has
paying
virtually
people
no
to come
guns,
in.
and yet you had multiple mass killings. The worst mass killing in the world happened in Norway on an island. There's no gun ownership there. But guess what? Because there's no gun ownership, the guy walked around for 4 hours killing people.
This Texas gunman was violent and aggressive and had failed background checks and wasn't able to buy a gun.
We don't know where he got the gun.
He got it through a private transaction.
So what do we need to
That's
do?
what's being reported.
So he got it through a
You
private.
need to deal with what we're doing as a culture that creates people willing to do this.
Oh, I understand, John. I understand. But you got sickos like this. You got to try to do something about that, too. I mean, this guy's sick.
Well, look, for example, I'll give you a good example. Florida, there was a Florida teen was arrested this past week for making an online, now we've talked about these red flag laws. This is not a red flag law. This is a law that's already in place in Florida. So the student posted remarks on Discord, which is apparently some site for gamers. So the FBI found the post, found out who he was because he didn't put it under his real name, notified the local police department, which, by the way, is where the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting happened. It's the same county. So they go the next morning and they arrest the kid. And you can pull this video up, and you'll see one of the main problems with this in this video. The mother, when they arrested him, the mother is out there going, but he's just a little kid playing a video game. These kids say stuff like that all the time. It's a joke to them. It's a game. Now, she's whining and crying. The deputy, it's actually very interesting. The deputy says, ma'am, this is a felony. He's going to be taken into juvenile detention. He's going to be charged with, under Florida law, it is either a second or a third degree felony. Now, that's not a red flag law. That law is already on the books. It just requires enforcement.
What do you think makes a 14-year-old shoot his 5 members of his family in Elkhart, Alabama?
That's again,
Elmont, Alabama.
We have to find out what we're doing as a culture that create these kids. Kids did not used to do this.
14 years old, it has to be part of their upbringing.
It's the culture. It's not just it is their upbringing, obviously, but it's the culture that they're in. Even the best homes, these kids are subject to stuff on TV. They're subject to stuff in school.
So what do we do about the culture?
You have to start trying to change it, or they're going to get in the car and they're going to drive over people in the sidewalk if they're angry at them.
What would we do to change it? What do we do to change the culture?
Well, first
right
off,
now? The way the culture's going,
you have to recognize what we're doing. We took God out of the schools in 1972. Mm-hmm. So whether you a Christian or not a Christian, if you're telling me that at least having a child have to read the 10 Commandments where it says thou shalt not kill, what could be the downside to that?
No patriotism, Dick.
No, they don't believe in the country. They don't believe in God. They don't believe they have any obligation to anyone outside themselves. They're told they're wonderful just by showing up. We don't have valedictorian at Cleveland High School because it's just so hard on the kids that don't win valedictorian.
I wonder how they do it. How do they do it at Bradley High School?
They do it like they've always done it.
I know. Cleveland, I can't believe Cleveland stopped that.
But my point is, think about that. It's too hard on the kids that don't win. That's part of the problem. These kids come up with this idea that they should have everything they want, and when they don't get it, they're angry little snots.
30-something thousand less kids played football this past year. You know that?
Football's probably got a decline in its future because, you had the Colts quarterback retired, at 28, 29?
Cause?
Because he can't walk.
Because there's more and more studies coming out showing that even at high school age that it's having an effect on kids' brains. I think John's right that in the long run is a sport that will decline.
You don't think it might knock some sense into them?
Well, you could fix it. Look, this actually...
Back then we used to call it knocking sense into them.
Well, look, this has some connection back to what we're talking about with guns. There are some counterintuitive things that might work. In football, for example, if you got rid of a lot of the padding, you actually could probably decrease the injuries because the padding has gotten better and better, which has allowed them to hit in harder and harder impact way. Rugby, for example. We look at rugby and you're like, oh my God, look how rough that looks. They don't have the injury rate that football has because they don't hit their heads together.
They don't have the monsters that are playing either.
Well, that's
true.
You,
we've got some green giants that are on the football field right now. Mm-hmm. Huge. I mean, some of these kids come out today. You've got a son. How big is your son?
Well, when he was playing, they had him up to 330 pounds, 6'5".
That's amazing. That's just amazing to me.
Now think about this though. He's around 205 pounds now. So that's what they were able to put on him.
Isn't that amazing? All right, let's take a break and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
WOOP LP, Cleveland, Tennessee.
Yeah, you looking for something sweet? I know you are. Bring your little sweet self to the Village Bake Shop. Around since 1961, there ain't a baked good in the galaxy the Village Bake Shop can't whip up for you. So when you're ready to treat your mouth to a taste you won't soon forget, get over to the Village Bake Shop in the Village Green Town Center, or give them a call at 476-5179. You dig?
No dealers allowed.
Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, offering the best with over 70 styles of recliners, sofas, electronic lift chairs, full living room packages. Call Mike now at 961-7239 because Jackson Catnapper now offers sales to the public
every Saturday. That's right, every Saturday.
From 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Or call Mike at 961-7239. Or go see him
every Saturday
at 1911 King Edward Avenue, just across from the main plant. Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933. 961-7239.
No dealers allowed.
Inside the train testing facility, our heating and cooling products are put through 16 weeks of extreme temperature fluctuations to simulate 5 years of wear and tear. But these aren't just seasonal shifts. Inside the lab, it fluctuates between 150 degrees one day to sub-zero temperatures and layers of snow the next. Then back to hot, then back to cold. Then hot and cold. Hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. And we didn't even get through the first month. We test, so it runs.
Looking for a heating and air unit that's been tested and then tested some more, then nothing will do but a train. And when you want the best in train service, there's only one place to turn, Mechanical Systems. With more than 30 years experience, Mechanical Systems is your local train comfort specialist, and they're ready to make your life more comfortable. Give them a call at 336-5739. That's Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. 336-5739. High quality service and installation for more than 30 years.
It's hard to stop a train.
Attention, Cleveland area creditors. Are you tired of dealing with debtors that owe you money? I'm Jeff Renfro, and I've owned and operated Financial Recovery, a debt recovery specialist here in my hometown of Cleveland for 18 years. We're a licensed and bonded Tennessee collection agency working for a wide variety of creditors from commercial, manufacturing, physicians, dentists, attorneys, small business owners to individuals. Look, any kind of business dealing with billing, charge accounts, or even return checks. I know your past due accounts are not a top priority for you, but they would be to me. Let me try to make it easy for you to make a change in the way you've been handling your accounts. There's no contract and no cost to you in most cases, as our fee of only 30% can be added to the balance owed to you. So, whether you have hundreds of accounts monthly and need help with your billing and collection, or you're just an individual and somebody owes you money, let me help you. Give me a call at 400-5376 and I'll come by and see you. That's 400-5376.
Financial Recovery, a licensed and bonded collection agency in Cleveland, Tennessee, 400-5376.
Economy Rentals, Cleveland's oldest and locally owned rent-to-own store. Can you believe it's almost fall, y'all? And at Economy Rentals, where we make it easy to own, whether you want appliances, furniture, TVs, electronics, and more. Check them out. Speaking of furniture, it's back to school, y'all. You know what that means for the kids? 2 rooms of furniture, only $39.95 a week. Hey, that includes a 2-piece living room suite, coffee table, 2 end tables, and a set of lamps, and a complete bedroom suite with full-size mattress and foundation. 2 rooms of furniture, $39.95 a week. Check them out. Economy Rentals. Hey, also don't forget, washer and dryer combo. You kids may be going to college, may need some help washing and drying. $21.95 a week for a washer and dryer combo. That's just part of the deals you can find at Economy Rentals, where we make it easy to own with our back-to-school specials. This month, in August, call them 472-6105 or go see them 901 Sahara Drive or check them out at economyrentals.net and on Facebook. That's Economy Rentals, 472-6105 or 901 Sahara Drive.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
All right, we're back. 7 groups that conduct voter registration drives have asked a federal judge to stop a new Tennessee law that threatens them with fines and criminal prosecution for failing to comply with a slew of new regulations. Among the plaintiffs are the League of Women Voters of Tennessee, the American Muslim Advisory Council, the Mid-South Peace and Justice Center, Rock the Vote, the Memphis Center Labor Council, and HeadCount.
Of course.
Now then, the deal is, the new law basically talks about if there's somebody going out and trying to register these people and cause a lot of chaos,
It's
there's going to be some
It's the
fines.
same stuff it's legal in California. It's under a lawsuit in North Carolina. It's batch registrations where they just register people with, a lot of times they register them without even having them involved in the registration. And then in North Carolina and California, for example, they were intercepting the ballots at the mailbox and voting them. It's voter fraud, and those are all Democratic
it's
groups.
the same thing that was the League of Women Voters having a table at the mall, which they did all through our childhood.
Nobody's against that, and it's not the same thing at all.
Yeah, it is the same
it's
thing.
Batch.
Because they took the applications there and turned them all in mass.
Well, there's
but now that's suddenly a crime and bad.
No. They took the application from people that approached the booth. This is registering people who don't approach the booth.
Okay.
It is.
And it's registering them correctly.
I got an easy one. When you turn 18 in America, you automatically are registered to vote. How hard is that?
It shouldn't be.
Why not?
Because voting is a responsibility, and if you don't have enough gumption to go register, I don't want you voting, Franklin. I'll say that. I don't want you voting.
I think it's pretty clear your party doesn't want people voting.
It's pretty clear your party wants them all to vote.
Look, in Canada,
all the illegal immigrants and everybody, right?
In Canada, they have the liberal politicians in Canada. Now, you're going to think I'm making this up. They said that climate change is such a threat to our world that we should allow 8-year-olds to vote, because 8-year-olds would vote the right way on climate change. That's where the Democrats are at now, and the liberal progressives.
We got a call coming in. Let's see what they want to talk about. Go ahead, caller.
Hey, Steve. Good morning, buddy.
Good.
You know what to say, don't you? That would say that you shouldn't rock the boat. But, no, I just want to comment on I think you said that the old Griffin's Kawasaki building was burning.
Yeah, Griffith Kawasaki downtown.
Well, it used to be Ed Moore's Yamaha shop.
That's correct.
And now there's a little bit of history right here, guys. I was the first one on the 650 Yamaha. He ordered it for me, and I own the first 650 Yamaha here in Cleveland, Tennessee. And the people used to look at it to see, because it was a 4-cycle engine, and the Yamaha was actually 2-cycle motorcycles.
Well, I'm going to give you one. I was the first one probably to own a Bridgestone here in Cleveland, Tennessee. They used to sell Bridgestones.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, actually, my 10-speed bicycle came from there.
Well, anyway, I was the first one on one from Ed Moore, Yamaha, 650 Yamaha, and I didn't want to start in about something else, but I started to hang up, but I figured it was rude to hang up, so I just thought I'd tell you guys about that.
All right, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks.
But anyway, the voter registration, what I see here is that they have paid workers to go out and try to solicit these people. That's the problem. If they're non-paid work, if the person trying to solicit voters is non-paid, it's not as big a deal because they're not trying to do it in mass quantities.
Well, the problem is in the North Carolina
volunteers don't have to.
In the North Carolina district, they were registering people without their permission, and then they were intercepting the votes at the mailbox, the ballots, and then submitting them.
Who was
actually
doing
legal.
that, you think?
Well, in that case, it was a Republican race, and it's in court. But here's the interesting thing. The Democrat Party, who completely controls the state of California, actually made that legal in California. So what's amazing is the Democrats are arguing about it in North Carolina, but they're perfectly okay with it going on legally in California.
What do you think? You're awful quiet this morning, Franklin.
I think that we ought to be encouraging everyone to vote.
We should. And you should have the gumption to go take care of that.
They're saying
group ought
registering
to do it
somebody
for
to
you.
vote doesn't mean that they go vote.
But Franklin,
So I don't know why your issue is about registration.
I'm glad you said that because that's the problem. These groups aren't just registering them. The groups are registering them, getting the ballot, taking the ballot to them, and turning the ballot back in. That shouldn't be happening.
Here's the new law would affect the groups in several ways. It requires organizations holding voter registration drives to register with the state of Tennessee and ensure that every person participating in a drive completes training by the state's coordinator of elections. Failure to do so could result in criminal prosecution. The law also imposes fines on groups turning in 100 or more incomplete applications within 1 year. Penalties can reach $10,000 per county, where violations occur if more than 500 incomplete forms are submitted.
That's what these companies were doing. People were coming in from out of state. They were registering everybody and their brother. They were registering illegals. They were registering anybody they could register to try and get another vote in the box.
But unpaid volunteers are not subject to these rules.
Which seems pretty reasonable to me.
Let's take a phone call. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Hey, good morning. I'm going to ask a question and then hang up and let y'all discuss it. Can y'all give me a good reason why we don't have a consolidated government in Cleveland? Why we don't consolidate the county and the city?
Well, would you like to do that?
I think it would probably save a lot of tax dollars.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this in the past, and
Actually, they've studied it multiple times.
Yeah, and I mean,
the reason they typically give is disparities in pay rates between county and city employees,
which we are quickly wiping away.
That's the reason it's typically given.
Well, I'll tell you another reason. The people in the
Caller,
county.
are you still there? Okay.
Another reason is the people in the county don't trust the city, and they don't
And
want
vice
this.
versa.
Well, but the difference
vice
is,
versa.
Franklin, the city can't control them. The city, if you don't live in the city, you can't be controlled by the city. What they worry about is when you put a metro government in, you effectively allow the city to have control over the rest of the county. And that's what scares a lot of people. Yeah, that's what scares a lot of people. And I understand that. Now, originally, Dad was actually on a study committee in the early 80s about the school system. And the problem then was you couldn't lower the per pupil expenditure of the city. You had to raise the per pupil expenditure of the county. And there was such a difference that it was, at that time, it was like $18 million, I think.
I wonder what we pay per student.
That's available. You can get that
here in Cleveland.
You can get
That's
that in a week.
available. The systems report that.
Yeah.
Average expenditures per
It's
pupil.
over 6,000, and I may be way off on that.
Is this city or county?
In the county, and I think it's 7 or 8, maybe in the city. We can find that by next week.
I saw something the other day. The national average is about 14,000 per student.
Yeah, and our kids don't score anywhere near. We're actually right at the top in per pupil expenditure in the world, and our kids are nowhere near the top in achievement, and it's been flatlined for decades. That was part of my point earlier. Some of this talk about our culture, we need to look at some of the, Bill Gates did this. He gave over $2 billion to 3 school systems right at 2000. I think 99, 2000. And he did it to build more buildings, lower classroom size. 2011, he comes back and says, look, I'm a data guy, and so I gave all this money. We built these schools. We lowered the classroom size, and I looked at the data. There was no increase in any area except a slight improvement in classroom discipline, which That makes sense. But there was no benefit to math, reading, science, anything. And so he said the key to a successful school system is a good teacher. So what he recommended was you take $5,000, you identify the best teachers, you offer them $5,000 to take 10 extra students in their classroom. You know what happened to him? He got death threats. Because the school union, they don't want to identify a good teacher or a bad teacher. We can't pay teachers different. So you get a teacher who goes to college and gets a bachelor's degree in biology or in mathematics. We can't pay them any different than a teacher who has just a general education degree. Well, why would anybody get a mathematics or a biology degree if they don't earn any extra from that? So we can't pay our teachers different. They're all paid the same. And we have spent, like I said, trillions to build bricks and mortar when it has had zero effect on our education system.
What do you think we should do, Franklin?
Well, I have long advocated that teachers needed to be paid more for the primary reason of attracting the best, most talent into the profession.
But if you were able to...
And I totally agree with part of what John said, which is what the statistics over and over show is there are highly effective teachers who produce highly effective and praiseworthy results. You know, what is the difference between those folks and the other folks? Sometimes it's qualifications, sometimes it's talent.
But the point is, Franklin, we can't pay them on that. That's the problem. In the corporate world, if you show more talent or you have more expertise, they pay you more.
The problem is that you can't solve the problem overnight that way.
No, we've got
But if you pay teachers more money over time, that will attract more people into the profession.
But Franklin, the problem is if you pay them all more, one, you're wasting money because some of them don't deserve more, and two, you're still not differentiating between the good and the mediocre. And so if you want more good, if you want more people to say, hey, I'll get a business degree and go into education, or I'll get a math degree or a science degree and go into education, they have to earn more for that math or science degree. Miss Fitzgerald had 35 people in my class, the last when I had her. I would put that English education up against any classroom in the country at that time. And there were 35 of us in the class.
Mm-hmm. What about the voucher system?
Well, here's the real issue if you really want to talk about it. Charter schools, study after study after study shows that the charter schools have been a success because the charter schools that aren't a success are closed. The ones that are a success grow. And in New York City and in Washington, D.C. and in Baltimore, people stand in line for days to try and get their kids into these charter schools. But guess what? The teachers union oppose charter schools because it's a threat to their power and their control.
Well, that's the union side of it.
We were talking about this earlier. I've been trying to find the information. The last data I can find online is the 2015 school year. Bradley County spent $8,429 per pupil, which, by the way, put us in the bottom third of the state in that regard, for whatever that's worth.
But
I'm just throwing out raw data, is all that is.
Okay. So I was obviously way behind.
Well, I would assume it's higher now because that's 4-year-old data.
Right.
I'm sure it's gone up some. I don't know how much. I haven't found Cleveland City schools. Yeah, I did. I'm sorry.
That'd be interesting to find out
Cleveland City schools for the same period, $92.39.
So that's only $800.
$800 more per student.
92
at
what?
that point. $92.39.
But here's the point.
Now, I understand that is electricity, security.
That's everything.
Textbooks.
And that's a whole other discussion. How much money is in the classroom? How much money is in administration? And by the way, with their budgets, you can't tell. If you ask,
I bet you these numbers have been fudged around a little
Well,
bit.
it may be, but my point is you can't tell how much is in the classroom. I got a couple of the budgets years ago, and I thought, okay, I'll just look and see how much is in administration. Well, they blur everything together. They take administrators and they put them out at a school, and so they're listed under that school's budget, and you can't actually separate an actual percentage of how much is administration, how much is actually in the classroom.
It's difficult.
Well, it wouldn't be. They could make it very easy. They don't want to make it easy. But the point here is you go back probably 50 years and you look, and you can look at the numbers that Franklin just got for the country and see what we have done per pupil expenditure. It has skyrocketed. It has tripled over the last 40 or 50 years, and yet our achievement has flatlined at best and declined in some respects.
I suspect, I may be wrong, but you could probably break it down even further by individual school, and I bet the numbers would vary wildly there.
But here's my point.
If you got a school that have a lot of teachers who've been around for 25 years, they're going to have higher salaries there than ones who have a lot of teachers who've been there 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they try to
whether that shows. Well, in theory, that's what they should do, but I don't know if that's what happens or not.
But here's my point. If you've tripled spending over a 40 or 50 year period and you saw no increase in your scores, then money is not the issue. And every time we try to talk about education, all we hear is we need more money. Well, you've needed more money for 50 years, you've tripled your spending, and you've saw virtually no improvement across the board. Our kids are like 15th or 16th in math in the world, and yet we're top per pupil expenditure in the world, one of the top.
What do we got to do to change it? Voucher system.
What the voucher system does is it makes the public schools actually have to show results and compete with the private schools or with the charter schools. You know, Louisiana was the bottom of the rung in the United States when the hurricane hit. What was it, 6 or 8 years ago? Governor Jindal at the time didn't really have any choice. I think about 80% of the schools were wiped out, and so he turned to charter schools. They saw huge increases in their test scores.
But even that is a little misleading in the sense that they had a much smaller school population after that because so many people had moved to other areas. And so it wasn't clear if what you got was
New Orleans?
A loss of a lot of students who were amongst the poorest who had to leave.
There's some of that, but the fact of the matter is charter schools consistently score above. Why do you think parents in inner city neighborhoods wait for days in line to try and get their children into the charter schools? Now, interesting thing, Michelle Rhee, who is a actual liberal Democrat, she was the superintendent of the Washington, D.C. schools. She put a voucher system in place. It was hugely popular, hugely successful. Now that, because it's D.C., is actually run by the Democrats or run by Congress. So she did that while the Republicans were in charge, and they had elected a little more moderate mayor. They ran him out of office, elected a liberal Democrat. The Democrats took Congress back, and they wiped that voucher system out in D.C. because it's a threat to the public school union. Not the public schools, it's a threat to the union. I mean, why do you think that the public schools were so upset about homeschool children being able to play sports in the public schools? That was a huge battle, and we finally pushed that through a few years ago in Tennessee. But think about it. Why would you care if a kid played football or not? You know why?
Tell me.
Because the number one reason more parents didn't homeschool their kids was the kids didn't have an opportunity to play sports. And so the teachers' unions were terrified that if you allowed them to play sports, more people would homeschool their kids. Which, by the way, more people are homeschooling their kids.
Well, I know. I've got a niece that's homeschooling her kids. She set up a whole classroom in the basement of their house, and I mean, it's set up like a.
And there are people who have the ability to do that and will do a very good job.
Yeah, and there
are also people who are hopelessly unqualified to do it, and the law doesn't really discriminate between the two.
Well, that is true.
I think the kids suffer some from being homeschooled by not being not being with other kids.
Well, let me put 2 cents in on that, though. Perhaps they read the Bible about thou shalt not kill, and A, they don't shoot their parents in the middle of the night, and B, they don't get shot in a school. You know, when we talk about what are you going to do about gun violence, maybe if more people homeschooled their kids and were actually allowed, because it is still allowed inside your privacy of your home, maybe they teach morals and ethics, things we don't teach in schools anymore.
What if you had public schools online?
Well, actually, I was going to say that about the homeschool. Homeschooling has drastically changed over the last 5 to 10 years because of the computers and because of online. I mean, look, we've got people getting college degrees. You can get an MBA at Harvard online now. So the idea that you can't have, now Franklin's right, you still have to have a parent that makes them do it, but a lot of these homeschools are not like it used to be. You know, it used to be a huge burden on the parent themselves. Now they subscribe, they pay, and that's the thing about vouchers. They're paying all of their taxes, and yet they're not utilizing that at all because they've pulled their kids out of the public system. So they deserve a little bit of that back.
All right, I want to change the subject a little bit. I want to know about Comey. What's going on with Comey right now and these investigations? And
the inspector general found that he violated an internal policy by leaking some information. Unlike what the president said, they did not find that he had committed a crime, however.
So let me discuss that.
So criticize him,
all right, wait a minute.
but that's the actual criticism.
Explain this to me, though, Franklin. The reason he didn't break any laws is because he didn't have the information that he released run through the committee that deems it classified. Now, it was subsequently deemed classified. So he's a good lawyer. So what he did was he released information, didn't ask for it to go through evaluation for classification. And then he was even slicker still. He released it to a friend who's not an employee of the FBI, but he did have a security clearance. And so technically, he didn't release classified information to a non-classified person. Now, that person turned around and sent it to the Washington Post, but that person didn't work for the FBI. So this was a lawyerly, crappy thing to do. He technically skirted the law because he's a good lawyer.
So what about Clapper and all that group? What do you think is going to
happen?
Look,
this is not the end.
Is anything ever going to happen?
No, wait a minute. You got to understand. Comey's probably in a bind. He needs to be quiet because there's another Inspector General report coming out on the origination of the investigation into the Trump campaign, and he probably is going to be charged with that. There probably are going to be indictments coming out of that.
Where he signed off on the FISA report?
He signed off on it 3 times, and he signed off stating that it had been verified. We now know that it was never verified. They made no attempt to verify it.
Let's just get down to earth here. It's pretty obvious that the Democrats were upset because of the election results.
He was a Republican.
No, he's not much of a Republican.
He's a lifelong Republican.
You can call him.
All the people you're really upset about are lifelong Republicans.
There's a name for them, isn't it? It's kind of like a halfback.
All right, so
from
before
the north,
you get too
goes south and comes back. They work for the Democrats. Let me just rephrase it. I think they all learned they could do whatever they wanted to under the Democratic regime.
This IG report, let me just read a quote from it. It said, Comey said, this is his quote, he was compelled to take these actions. If I love this country and I love the Department of Justice and I love the FBI, that he had to do it. Well, the IG concludes that if everyone violated the rules, quote, to achieve a personally desired outcome, as Mr. Comey did, the FBI would be unable to dispatch its law enforcement duties. That's the report that he's actually saying he deserves an apology for.
Say that one more time, John.
If everyone in the FBI did what he did, this is the IG, the FBI would be unable to dispatch its law enforcement duties properly. That's the direct quote out of this IG report.
Look, there's
vindication for.
There's plenty of things that I'm critical of James Comey about, not the least of which is being more responsible than anybody else for electing Donald Trump. So I don't know why you guys aren't actually building statues for him. You wouldn't have your Trump presidency if it weren't for the actions that Comey took.
What do you think? Why do you think that?
There's a 5-point swing in the polls within 2 weeks of Election Day in Trump's favor.
It was happening anyway, Franklin. Hey, Franklin.
Oh, for
the
goodness
Trump
sake.
train was on fire by then, baby.
The Trump
train
was on fire for sure over his comments on the Access Hollywood tape. His polls had fallen off the table. That's what turned it around for him. So you can say anything you want, but nobody did more to get him elected than James Comey.
Well, frankly, why are your people so happy with him now?
Who said we were?
You are. He's on all the TV shows. He's writing books. No Democrat is fussing about him anymore.
You've not heard me say anything positive about him.
What about Nader? What's his name?
Who?
Oh, Nadler.
Nadler. He's going to bring up this investigation again about these two women and campaign violations.
We're going to spend,
Is this guy a living, breathing nut or what?
He's Jabba the Hutt.
He's what?
Jabba the Hutt.
I mean, Nadler. He's like a fly on the wall, isn't he?
Oh, listen, why don't we just all give in now, and let's do what we can to help the president. Let's all go register and spend a weekend at one of his properties so we can help him out.
I think that's a great idea, Frank.
That's what
I'm
we should
perfectly
do.
okay with that because free enterprise is what built this country.
That's right.
I'm perfectly
and let's
all right
make sure
with that.
the government spends all their money there.
Well, I can tell you one thing. Taxing the rich won't pay for the Democrat promises. These Democrats expect to grow the economy with taxing the rich.
Well, you can't.
You can't do that. Franklin, is there not anything else better you got to talk about from the Democratic Party? What are you going to do to help this country?
I don't know. Invest in infrastructure.
Oh,
while the interest rates are low.
All right, listen. Let's talk about that.
While the rates are low,
you can't do that if you're actually tripling the budget to give free health care. And now, not only are they saying they're going to pay off everyone's college debt, they're going to pay off everyone's medical debt. Now, the state of California, completely democratically controlled, they actually passed universal health care about 2 or 3 years ago. The state budget in California is $200 billion. The cost for their health care plan was $400 billion. So they haven't done anything on it. It's literally still on the book. But they look at that. They know they can't afford to do it, but they won't admit it.
One last thing before we go. I think we ought to think about bailing out General Motors one more time, because now the auto union workers overwhelmingly voted to authorize strikes at the GM, Ford, Fiat, and Chrysler plants. My Lord, let's bail them out again. Bye-bye. See you next week.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey.